It was just after 6 a.m. when my phone rang. A calm morning, the kind where you expect paperwork and coffee, not death. But the voice on the other end belonged to the manager of the Royal Crest Hotel, one of the most expensive hotels in the city. His words were quick and nervous. "Detective, we found a man dead in one of the suites. He's in the bathroom. Please, you need to come quickly." The Royal Crest wasn't the kind of place you got murder calls from. Guests there were diplomats, wealthy businessmen, or tourists who paid more for one night than most people made in a week. A death inside that building wasn't just a tragedy, it was a scandal. I arrived within 20 minutes. Outside, everything looked normal. Polished cars in the driveway, a bellboy helping a family with their luggage. But upstairs, on the 12th floor, the air was heavy and silent. The corridor was taped off, and 2 uniformed officers were waiting for me. The suite was large, elegant, and perfectly arranged, except for the bathroom. There, on the marble floor near the bathtub, lay a man in his late 40s. He was fully dressed in a white shirt and trousers, though the shirt was slightly wet, as if splashed with water. His head rested against the tiled wall, and his eyes stared blankly upward. The first detail I noticed was the position of his body. It didn't look like someone who had slipped and fallen. His arms were oddly positioned, almost too neat, resting by his sides. The second thing was the absence of panic. Usually, in accidental deaths inside bathrooms, you find broken glass, a knocked-over bottle, a towel rack pulled from the wall, something that shows struggle or chaos. Here, everything was in perfect order. I crouched down to examine the body. No visible wounds, no blood, just dampness around his shirt collar and a faint bruise near his temple. The hotel manager explained what had happened. A housekeeper coming to clean the suite had knocked several times. When no one answered, she used her keycard and found the man lying there. She screamed. Security rushed in, and within minutes, management called the police. "Do we know who he is?" I asked. The manager nodded. "Yes. His name is Edward Clark, a British national. He checked in last night, alone. No guests with him. Passport and belongings are in the safe. I asked for the guest log and CCTV footage. At a place like this, every floor, every hallway, every elevator was covered by cameras. If anything unusual had happened, I would find it. But the strange part was this. Clark's suite was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Only one key card had been used, the one issued to Clark himself. At first glance, it looked like an accident, maybe a heart attack. But my instinct told me otherwise. Something about the scene felt arranged. The hotel room was sealed, and only my team and I were allowed inside. We started with the basics. Documenting everything. Photographs from every angle, measurements, fingerprints lifted from glass surfaces, and the entire bathroom carefully scanned. The man, Edward Clark, still lay on the bathroom floor while the medical examiner began her initial inspection. The medical examiner's notes: no stab wounds, no gunshot wounds, slight bruise on the right temple, possibly from impact against a hard surface. Fingertips showed faint moisture, as if he had tried to hold on to something wet. No defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. Livor mortis, settling of blood after death, suggested he had been dead for several hours, likely sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. It was too early to say the cause of death, but poisoning or suffocation seemed more likely than a natural heart attack. Inside the suite, the bedroom was untouched, bed perfectly made, curtains closed, suitcase neatly placed near the closet. His passport, wallet, and a thick envelope of cash were inside the safe. Robbery was clearly not the motive. On the desk, there was a half-empty glass of water and a hotel notepad with some scribbles. Meeting, 9 o'clock. Call Richard. Flight 14th. Nothing unusual, but names and dates can often unlock secrets. Bathroom details. This was where things got interesting. On the sink, a toothbrush and shaving kit were laid out neatly. Next to it, an expensive wristwatch had been placed carefully, as if Clark had removed it himself. On the counter, a small bottle of hotel-provided water was open, half empty. The bathtub had only a few drops of water inside. It looked like someone had filled it, then drained it. Near the toilet bin, I noticed a crumpled piece of tissue paper. When opened, it revealed faint traces of pink liquid, something unusual for a hotel bathroom. I instructed the lab team to collect samples from the glass of water, the tissue, and Clark's stomach contents once the autopsy was done. CCTV footage. Back in the hotel's security room, we checked the cameras covering the 12th floor hallway. Clark had been seen returning to his room at 10:48 p.m., carrying a small paper bag. He looked normal, no sign of distress. After that, nothing. No one else entered or left his suite. No suspicious figures near the door. Just silence in the corridor. Yet the locked door was the puzzle. How could he die in a locked room with no signs of forced entry? Interviews. The housekeeper who found him was shaking as she spoke. "I knocked 3 times, sir." No answer. I used my key card, but the chain lock from inside was on. I had to push the door a little, and then I saw him in the bathroom. This was important. The door was chain-locked from inside, meaning either Clark locked it himself or someone very clever staged it. The hotel manager added another piece. Mr. Clark was polite when he checked in. He didn't ask for company. He had dinner in the restaurant alone around 8 p.m., then left quickly. The restaurant staff confirmed it. He had ordered grilled salmon, mineral water, and coffee, no alcohol. He paid with his room card and left without speaking much. By the end of the first day of investigation, here's what I knew. Clark was alone in his suite. He was last seen alive at 10:48 p.m. He died between midnight and 3 a.m. His room was locked from inside. No valuables were stolen. There was a bruise on his temple, but nothing severe enough to kill him. Something unusual was found in the bathroom tissue. It didn't look like a simple accident anymore. The question burning in my mind was, if nobody entered, then how did Edward Clark die in that bathroom? By the second day, I knew the suite itself wasn't giving up its secrets easily. If I wanted answers, I needed to step outside the hotel and step into Edward Clark's life. Clark's passport confirmed he was a 47-year-old British national. He worked as a senior financial consultant at a London-based firm. His records showed frequent international travel, meetings in Singapore, Dubai, Zurich, clearly not an ordinary tourist. The British consulate was informed, and soon I had access to his business and personal background. His employer described him as a serious, detail-oriented man, not a heavy drinker, not into reckless behavior. Married once, divorced 5 years ago, 1 daughter in university. No criminal history, no known substance abuse. So why did a man like him end up dead on the bathroom floor of a luxury hotel? From his belongings, we retrieved his phone and laptop. Digital evidence always speaks, sometimes louder than people. Phone. The last outgoing call was at 9:12 p.m. to a contact saved as Richard H. The call lasted 4 minutes. After that, there were no calls or texts until Clark returned to the hotel. Laptop, password protected, but the IT team bypassed it. His email inbox had recent messages about a confidential client meeting scheduled for the next morning. No details, just vague wording. Attached to one email was a scanned financial report. Complex offshore accounts, millions transferred between shell companies. This wasn't normal consultancy work. It smelled like money laundering or corporate fraud. I went back to the Royal Crest and questioned staff again, this time pressing harder. The concierge recalled Clark asking about conference rooms earlier in the evening. He seemed cautious, sir. Asked me twice if there were private meeting rooms available, then said he'd handle it himself. A bartender remembered seeing Clark sit alone in the lobby bar around 9:30 p.m. He ordered sparkling water, made a short call, then left. He kept looking over his shoulder, the bartender added. No one saw him with another person, at least not inside the public areas. That phone call to Richard H. stood out. With help from Clark's firm, we traced the number. It belonged to Richard Hale, another financial consultant, also based in London. Hale was known to have worked on several of the same overseas projects as Clark. When contacted, Hale's response was peculiar. Yes, Edward called me that night. He sounded tense, said he was meeting someone important and needed advice. I told him to be careful. That was the last time we spoke. He insisted he had no idea Clark was in the city. But something in his tone suggested he knew more than he was admitting. The final autopsy report arrived in the evening. This was the breakthrough. Clark's stomach contained traces of cyanide, a fast-acting poison. The bruise on his temple was post-mortem, likely from his head hitting the wall after he collapsed. Time of death. Between 12:15 and 1 a.m. Cause of death, acute cyanide poisoning. This explained why there had been no struggle, no mess. Cyanide works quickly. Within minutes, a person loses consciousness, and within an hour, they are gone. The half-empty glass of water in the room now became critical. The lab confirmed it contained residual cyanide. This was no accident. Clark had been poisoned. But the locked door still haunted me. If someone had slipped cyanide into his drink, how did they manage to leave without being caught on camera? Unless they hadn't left at all. That's when I remembered the small paper bag Clark carried into his room at 10:48 p.m. Security log showed no one else entered. So here was the chilling possibility. Did someone meet him outside, hand him poisoned food or drink, and let him take it back to his room himself? Or did he unknowingly poison himself, thinking he was safe? With the financial records, the mysterious meeting notes, and the poisoned glass, two possible motives emerged. First, business motive. Clark was silenced because he knew too much about fraudulent financial dealings. Second, personal betrayal. Someone close, maybe even Richard Hale, manipulated him into walking straight into a trap. And yet, the biggest question remained unanswered. Who gave Clark the poisoned drink, and how did they escape unseen? I kept replaying the CCTV footage in my head. Clark walking into the hotel suite at 10:48 p.m., carrying that small paper bag. He never left, and no one else entered. The poisoned glass was clear evidence, but the question was, when and how was the poison added? The lab report came back on the paper bag. It had contained a small box from a local bakery just down the street. The receipt, found in the trash, showed Clark had purchased a slice of cake and a bottle of mineral water at 10:35 p.m. So Clark had bought his own late-night snack. That meant the poison could have been slipped in before he ever entered the hotel. I visited the bakery personally. The owner was cooperative and nervous. Yes, Clark had been there, bought cake and water, and left quickly. Did anyone else approach him? I asked. The cashier remembered something odd. There was another man sitting near the window, watching him. They didn't talk, but as soon as Mr. Clark left, the man left too. The bakery's CCTV showed it. Clark at the counter, and a man in his 30s sitting near the window, well-dressed, wearing a dark coat, keeping his eyes fixed on Clark. His face was partly turned, but clear enough for identification. This was the first real lead on a suspect. Back at the station, I dug deeper into Clark's laptop files. Those offshore accounts, the vague client meeting, it all pointed to something dangerous. A financial crimes analyst explained it to me. These accounts show laundering of at least $50 million. Clark's notes suggest he was about to expose the scheme. Someone had a lot to lose if he spoke up. The names attached to these accounts included shell companies linked to Richard Hale. That was it. The connection was no longer weak. Clark had likely confided in Hale, maybe even shared his plan to reveal everything. But instead of support, Hale may have seen betrayal. Still, one puzzle refused to leave my mind: the locked door. If Clark had consumed poisoned cake or water, he could have easily collapsed on his own. That explained the chain lock from the inside. But there was still the tissue with pink liquid in the bathroom trash. Lab results identified it as traces of cherry-flavored syrup mixed with cyanide. Someone had either coated the cake with it or tampered with the water bottle cap, meaning Clark had unknowingly poisoned himself with what he bought. But the poison wasn't placed by accident. It was deliberate, and the man in the bakery likely engineered it. The locked room wasn't a clever escape trick. It was a trap. The killer never needed to enter Clark's suite at all. Clark felt sudden nausea and dizziness from the poison, so he went into the bathroom for privacy and locked the chain from inside, not realizing he would soon collapse. Facial recognition matched the bakery CCTV to a name: Daniel Ross, 34, a freelance consultant who had once worked with Richard Hale. Ross had no fixed address in the city, but had entered the country 2 days earlier. His travel record showed multiple trips aligned with Clark and Hale's business routes. When his photo was shown to bakery staff, they confirmed, yes, that was the man watching Clark. Now the case was tightening like a noose. Piece by piece, the puzzle finally made sense. Clark was preparing to reveal financial misconduct involving offshore accounts. He confided in Richard Hale, who feared exposure. Hale contacted Daniel Ross, an associate willing to do the dirty work. Ross followed Clark, identified his routine, and struck at the bakery. By tampering with Clark's cake or water, Ross ensured the poison would be consumed inside Clark's locked hotel room. Clark returned, ate, collapsed in the bathroom, and died. From the outside, it looked like a mystery, but in reality, it was a meticulously staged murder. The final step was to confront Hale and Ross, but before arresting them, I needed undeniable proof linking them both to the poison. That proof would come in the form of surveillance, financial records, and digital forensics. Immigration confirmed Ross had entered the country using his real passport. Flight records showed his ticket was purchased by a company credit card registered to one of Hale's shell corporations. That was the first hard link. Hale had financed Ross's travel. Hotel surveillance also showed Ross entering the lobby briefly at 7 p.m. The same night, Clark returned, though he never checked in. He stayed only 10 minutes before leaving. That put him in Clark's vicinity, scouting. The bakery. CCTV was clear. Ross had been sitting inside, watching Clark purchase his late-night snack. Forensic tests on the mineral water bottle cap from Clark's room revealed microscopic tool marks, as if the cap had been opened and resealed. That confirmed tampering. Fingerprints on the water bottle belonged to Clark, but beneath those, faint prints were recovered. They matched Daniel Ross. That was the second hard link. Meanwhile, Clark's laptop revealed something crucial. In a draft email, never sent, Clark had written, "Richard, I know you're involved. I'm not sure if I can trust you anymore. If anything happens to me, people will know." This showed Clark suspected Hale and was preparing to expose him. We subpoenaed Hale's bank records. Within days of Clark's death, Ross's personal account received a large wire transfer from an offshore company tied directly to Hale. That was the third undeniable link. With the evidence lined up, I coordinated with the local task force. Ross was tracked to a rented apartment not far from the city center. The arrest was quiet. No gunfire, no chase. Just a knock on the door at 6 a.m., and Ross, startled and half awake, was taken into custody. In his belongings we found a receipt for the bakery dated the night of Clark's death, a small vial with trace cyanide residue hidden inside a toiletry bag, a disposable phone with calls logged to a UK number, the same one registered to Richard Hale. Ross didn't resist arrest. In the interrogation room, under the weight of the evidence, he broke. He admitted Hale had asked him to handle Clark, claiming Clark was about to expose financial fraud. Hale promised money and protection. Ross followed Clark, tampered with his water bottle at the bakery, and left the rest to fate. His story matched everything we already knew. Once Ross talked, we had enough to move on Hale. With cooperation from British authorities, Hale was picked up in London. His laptop contained encrypted emails with Ross discussing removing a problem. The money trail sealed it. Hale didn't confess, but he didn't need to. The documents, the transfers, and Ross's testimony were enough. The official report concluded, cause of death, cyanide poisoning, administered through tampered bottled water. Manner of death, homicide. Primary perpetrator, Daniel Ross, arrested. Mastermind, Richard Hale, arrested, awaiting prosecution. Motive, prevent Edward Clark from exposing large-scale financial fraud. The locked room mystery that first baffled us turned out not to be clever trickery, but a poisoning scheme designed to work without the killer ever entering the room. Clark locked himself inside, thinking he was safe. In reality, the danger had already been placed in his hands hours earlier. Standing in that bathroom on the first day, it had seemed impossible. A dead man, no intruder, no weapon. Just silence and marble floors. But every case leaves a trail. On glass, in bank records, in careless movements caught by a camera. And when you follow that trail long enough, the truth emerges. Edward Clark never made it to his meeting the next morning, but his death exposed the very corruption he was about to reveal. And in the end, justice found both the hand that delivered the poison and the mind that ordered it. Case closed.